This week on Vaticano, we discover Castel Gandolfo, where popes have spent their summers for 4 centuries. We explore the close bond between the papacy and the town and discover how the papal palace gave shelter to many refugees during the Second World War. We also sit down with Father Richard de Souza, director of the Vatican Observatory, to explore how faith and science can go hand in hand. And finally, we discover Castel Gandolfo's Marian heart, which continues to inspire prayer and devotion. For this and more, Vaticano starts now. Nestled in the lush hills overlooking Lake Albano, just a short distance from Rome, the small town of Castel Gandolfo has been the home to the Pope's summer residence for 400 years. The tradition began with Pope Urban VIII, who established the practice of leaving Rome during the oppressive summer heat for the cooler hills above the city.
È un bell'anniversario e raccontano gli storici che la prima volta che arrivò qui.
It is a beautiful anniversary. Historians recount that the first time Pope Urban VIII arrived here, cannon salutes fired at dawn in Rome to announce on May 10, 1626, his journey. A procession of carriages followed the pontiff in what later came to be known as the papal train, at a time when the train was still far from being invented.
As the Pope approached Castel Gandolfo, the townspeople and the local priors, seeing the large cloud of dust approaching in the distance, would begin firing small ceremonial fireworks as a sign of joy to welcome the Holy Father.
After the fall of the Papal States in 1870 and the annexation of the Papal territories by the newly unified Kingdom of Italy, the papal residence remained vacant and neglected for more than 60 years.
The Barberini villa had not yet been acquired. Everything was in a state of abandonment. Only Cardinal Marie de Val, the Secretary of State of Pope Pius X, came to the palace 2 or 3 times. But the popes did not return until the time of Pius XI.
Everything changed with the Lateran Pacts of 1929, which granted the papal residence extraterritorial status under the Holy See. Today, the 55-hectare estate stands on the site of the ancient villa of the Emperor Domitian, chosen for its unique microclimate, a rare blend of natural, historical, and environmental heritage. It is also now the heart of an ecological project launched in 2023 by Pope Francis, the Borgo Laudato Si, inspired by his 2015 encyclical Laudato Si. This green area has since become a weekly place of refuge for Pope Leo, who spends his time here playing tennis, swimming, and riding horses. And he's not the first one to do so.
Pope Leo does like all his predecessors, including Urban VIII, who traveled on horseback, but also Clement XIV, Ganganelli. They also rode on horseback. Inside the palace, there are tapestries that bear witness to this.
In 2016, Pope Francis transformed the Apostolic Palace into a museum, which is why, during the first year of his pontificate, Pope Leo XIV stayed at the Villa Barberini. Dozens of local families have lived here for generations, serving as custodians of invaluable memories of the popes.
It is they who, in a sense, also enrich us and communicate this relationship with the various pontiffs. For example, John XXIII. He would enter homes, lift the lids off the pots, and go into the kitchen to see whether the family was in need or not, whether they could feed all the members of their household, and if not, he would personally help them.
Thanks to accounts of everyday life, we gain insight into the Pope's daily routines and the way they related to and cared for the town. Every place has its own story to tell.
We have always lived alongside the popes. Just think that, during the time of Pope Clement XI Albani, the people of Castel Gandolfo were regarded almost as members of the Pope's own household. There was even a special statute governing Castel Gandolfo, which remained in force until the Law of Guarantees. Under this arrangement, the townspeople were subject not only to the ordinary civil authorities, but also to the major domo of the Apostolic Palace.
Castel Gandolfo is not just a historic residence. It has always been an oasis of prayer, reflection, and work as well. Here, popes have come to rest, write, and seek the silence needed to govern the Church.
St. John Paul II used to call this place the Second Vatican, because this is where a lot of the things happen also. It's not just that he comes here for rest. That's also, I think, a narrative that needs to be expanded on. The Pope didn't just come here to rest. Most of the summers throughout history, at least for the last 100 years, the Vicar of Christ, the successor of Peter, comes here. Yes, he does rest, but he also comes and invites experts to be able to prepare church documents in these very grounds.
For 400 years, the papal summer residence in Castel Gandolfo has watched over the hills above Rome. Its walls, history, and beauty continue to tell the story of the papacy and the Church. In a few moments, we'll return to explore the role of the papal summer residence during the Second World War.
Sometimes dreams come true, don't they? Everyone used to tell me, "No, I don't think so, you're just a dreamer." But I always remained confident and thought, slowly, patience. We'll see what he does.
13 years after Pope Francis decided not to spend his summertime in Castel Gandolfo and transformed the Apostolic Palace into a museum, Pope Leo XIV's decision to return to the town each summer marked a revival of the centuries-old papal tradition, a choice welcomed with widespread joy and anticipation.
For someone from Castel Gandolfo, the Pope means everything. There isn't a single resident of Castel Gandolfo who doesn't have a photo with a Pope. Very few have one with Pope Francis, though, because he only came a couple of times and never held those more special, informal receptions. So there's a 13-year gap to make up for. Pope Leo is making up for those 13 years, perhaps even a little too well.
In fact, Pope Leo has introduced a new way of spending time here. Instead of coming only for the summer, the Holy Father has been returning to Castel Gandolfo every Monday evening and staying through Tuesday, and always taking time to greet the pilgrims who come to say hello. He has also chosen to move back into the Apostolic Palace, the traditional residence of his predecessors, rather than staying at Villa Barberini in the heart of the Papal Gardens, where he spent the early months of his pontificate.
For us, the people of Castel Gandolfo, it's a great joy because the palace was closed for 13 years. Throughout Pope Francis's entire pontificate, it remained closed. For us, it's an immense joy because we've always lived alongside the popes.
With Pope Leo's return, the story of Castel Gandolfo continues.
Proprio quest'anno festeggiamo I 400 anni.
This year we are celebrating the 400th anniversary of the Pope's first holiday, because Urban VIII came here and stayed from the 10th of May to the 20th of May, 1626. So it is truly a place rich in history.
Quindi è proprio un luogo carico di storia.
The Papal Palace itself encloses within its walls the memory of 4 centuries of history, including the more painful chapters of the 20th century.
È stato un luogo di
It also became a place of refuge, especially during the Second World War, when Pope Pius XII gave shelter to some 12,000 refugees.
86 years old, Fausto D'Angelo remembers those days very well. Born here in Castel Gandolfo, his father, a shoemaker, opened a workshop opposite the Papal Palace back in 1923. During the Second World War, he was the one to urge the Pope to open the gates of the pontifical villas to those fleeing the conflict. As neutral Vatican territory, the villas were not only protected from attack during the war, but also became a safe haven for thousands of civilians.
Io mi ricordo, ero piccolo, dormivamo nella stanza degli svizzeri, dormivamo con...
I remember it well. I was a small child. We slept in the Swiss Guards barracks, even on mattresses on the floor, on the simple canvas camp beds. We stayed there for a long time, until the bombing of Propaganda Fide.
Il bombardamento di Propaganda Fides.
The College of Propaganda Fide was mistakenly hit during a major Allied air raid on February the 10th, 1944. German forces had established strategic positions in the surrounding hills south of Rome, making the area a target as the Allies sought to disrupt enemy supply lines. Despite the papal residence's extraterritorial status, the bombing destroyed the college and devastated the surrounding area. Nearly 500 local civilians were killed.
A Propaganda Fide c'è stato un bombardamento e da lì noi abbiamo visto tutti.
The bombing of Propaganda Fide happened right before our eyes, and we saw everything that followed. The rescue efforts, the wounded being brought in, even into the Apostolic Palace itself. It was a remarkable gesture by the Holy See to shelter the people of Castel Gandolfo, and to this day the townspeople remain deeply grateful for it.
I castellani per questo le sono molto riconoscenti.
The palace has witnessed the history of many popes over the last 400 years. The same is true for the families of Castel Gandolfo, who share a deep bond with the pontiffs and with this place, rich in countless memorable moments.
The popes chose this place, and we followed along. After all, many of our families are now centuries-old families who have been living here for generations.
La nostra famiglia, le nostre famiglie, la mia moglie, diciamo che.
And my wife's family, too, have had businesses here since around 1870, passed down from great-grandparents to grandparents to parents. Now, it is our turn to carry it on. We have already prepared our children as well, and then our grandchildren will decide what they want to do.
Poi decideranno I nipoti quello che vorranno fare.
There's more to Castel Gandolfo than just the Apostolic Palace. Here you can find one of the world's oldest active observatories. From as early as the 1600s, the Catholic Church has been investigating the cosmos and seeking to understand more behind God's creation through the means of science. Today, the Vatican Observatory is led by the Jesuits, who dedicate much of their time to astronomical research, analysis, and scientific discovery.
I consider myself an Indiana Jones of astronomy.
Father Richard de Souza was appointed the new director of the Vatican Observatory by Pope Leo XIV in 2025. He sat down with Sofia Chubak to explain how astronomy and the Catholic faith are more related than most people might think.
A lot of people might see science and God as being in conflict, but how do God, faith, Catholicism and science, how do they go together?
I think one should take a step back and talk about how faith and reason go together. And the Church has always sustained that both faith and reason need to go hand in hand. This has been the official position always of the Church, not to instrumentalize science, to be showing that it is against religion, and not to instrumentalize religion that is against the sciences. I think the best example of this would be the theory of the Big Bang, proposed by Father Georges Lemaitre in the 1930s. He proposed that the universe was expanding, and then and if you would extrapolate back in time, it was a dense, hot initial object, an initial star, which he called the primordial atom, which was a theory which was derided by all scientists, but which was celebrated by Pius XII as a great discovery. And finally the proof came in the 60s, and we know this theory today as the Big Bang. It is a very Catholic theory.
The origins of the observatory dates back to the 16th century. Why did the Vatican decide that it needs an observatory? Could you tell me a little bit about the history?
The Church has always been interested in cosmology and adopted the Greek cosmology of the time. But around the 16th century, a serious problem arose, namely that the calendar which they were using at that time, the Julian calendar, was a bit out of sync with the seasons. And they could not predict the date of Easter well. And so the church began to formally study astronomy in those days. The biggest of them was always at the Roman College, the former Gregorian University, but there were also observatories within the Vatican, on Campidoglio and Monte Mario. And when Italy took over all the observatories after it conquered Rome at the end of the 19th century, the Pope was left without an observatory. And Pope Leo XIII then refounds this observatory in 1891, first within the Vatican. In the 1930s, we moved here to Castel Gandolfo due to the growing light pollution of Rome, and we have been here since then.
You are a Jesuit priest, you are also an astronomer. How did you eventually come to work in astronomy?
I must start off by saying that I joined the Jesuit order very young, at the age of 17, 18. I was always interested in the sciences, and before joining the Jesuits, I had to seriously decide between a life as a scientist, engineer, or that of a priest, and I chose that of a priest. But as I entered the order and I grew within the order, my own Jesuit superiors encouraged me to continue my pursuit of the sciences by studying physics and astronomy. I would say that not everyone at the observatory, we're all Jesuits here at the observatory, not all of us have the same path. Many of my colleagues studied astronomy and physics before they decided to become a priest. Well, I did it in reverse. I became a priest and then studied astronomy. I think there are different ways of serving the Lord, and the Lord has His own ways in guiding us.
As you study the vastness of the universe, the galaxies, space, I'm guessing that sometimes it's easy to look at the world, to look at us and see that actually in the grand scheme of things, we are very small, we are very insignificant. But how has this helped you view our place in creation?
The more I study the universe, the more I study astronomy, the more I am able to understand our Creator, and the more I am able to give praise to God for His marvelous creation. So in a sense, the natural world brings us towards God, indicates us towards God. We still need revelation, but there are so many hints hidden in the natural world. And in discovering these hints through studying the sciences, reinforces my own faith in God. When I look up, I have to say that my direction is less turned inwards but more pointed outwards, in the sense that I look up and I say, wow, the vastness of the universe, the vastness of God. My thoughts are less about ourselves, but more about the vastness of the universe and the vastness of God who created this universe.
Thank you very much, Father.
Thank you.
We'll be back after a short break to discover the Marian heart of Castel Gandolfo. While Castel Gandolfo is not a Marian shrine, it has a deep Marian identity. Every 15th of August, the town comes alive as the Pope joins pilgrims and locals in celebrating the Assumption, one of the church's most important Marian solemnities. Inside the Church of St. Thomas of Villanova, the only pontifical parish outside the Vatican, a remarkable painting depicts the dogma at the heart of the feast.
The painting dates back to the 1600s and depicts the Virgin Mary being assumed into heaven because the apostles went to her tomb, but when they opened the tomb, her body was no longer there. At that moment, Mary appeared in heaven, body and soul, which is precisely what the dogma teaches. So this belief had always been present in the consciousness of Christians and was later formally defined by the Church. So it's a devotion that has always been connected to this church, also because the Mass of the Assumption is celebrated here by the Pope.
To the great joy of the town's residents and the faithful, Pope Leo restored the historic tradition of spending a part of the summer at the official summer residence of the pontiffs. Last summer marked the first time Pope Leo celebrated the Assumption in Castel Gandolfo, an experience the parish priest recalled as deeply moving.
From early this morning, there were crowds of people here in the square, waiting. They remained in silence, in this expectation of the Pope's arrival. When he appeared, the enthusiasm, the joy that erupted, it was something beautiful.
In his homily, the Holy Father highlighted how celebrating the Assumption is another way to celebrate the Paschal mystery of Jesus.
When in this life we choose life, we are right to see in Mary assumed into heaven our own destiny. She is given to us as the sign that the resurrection of Jesus was no isolated event, no mere exception. In Christ, we too can swallow up death.
Beyond being one of the pontifical parishes, the Church also carries the name of a saint with a special significance for the Pope, St. Thomas of Villanova. The 16th century bishop who lived during the time of the Council of Trent was also an Augustinian. The Pope even carries a relic of the saint in his pectoral cross. The Church holds a special importance not only for the Augustinians, but also for the Salesians, who have served the parish for many years.
The church has existed since around 1650, when it was built. And at that time, the Augustinians served here as a religious community until the Salesians were invited by Pope Pius XI in 1926. Since then, the Augustinians moved to Rome, to the parish of St. Anne, and we have been here. So this connection between the Augustinians and the Salesians is, I think, something special.
Thanks to the different religious traditions connected to the Church, another Marian devotion can be found inside.
Another Marian devotion in this church is that of Mary, Help of Christians, because the priests serving here are Salesians, and this devotion is particularly connected to their spirituality. The cult of Mary, Help of Christians was greatly spread thanks to Don Bosco. There is also a statue of Mary, Help of Christians in the church, whose feast is celebrated on May 24th, the same date on which the encyclical Laudato Si was published.
Inspired by the vision of Pope Francis and his encyclical Laudato Si, the Castel Gandolfo Gardens now also offer visitors a space to pray and deepen their connection with creation.
People who care for the environment, don't necessarily care about people who are the poor and justice issues. People who care about justice don't necessarily care about God or spirituality. They care about the individuals. People who care about spirituality may not care about the environment. And so what Pope Francis, the Church's angle with Laudato Si, is that everything needs to be reconnected.
Open to the public, the gardens invite visitors to pray before the Madonnina, a statue of the Little Madonna, where according to tradition, various popes have brought the burdens of the Church before Mary, Mother of the Church.
The Madonnina is an image of Our Lady, the Immaculate Conception, that recalls the theology of Revelation, of that woman, dressed with the sun, who steps on the serpent. What an image is given to us. It reminds us that she is the new Eve. As we know with creation and what our forefathers, Adam and Eve, did in disobeying God, it led to that exploitation of human beings and of creation. Mary presides over this aspect of Borgo Laudato Si. Mary, who is the Immaculate Conception, who steps over evil, who is the new Eve in creation and shows us a new path to take care of what God has given us.